We're here today to talk about a case that happened back May 28th, 2021. The Indian River County Sheriff's Office received a 911 call, the type of call that we never want to receive. It was about an unresponsive 2-month-old infant. Our dispatchers assisted giving CPR over the phone, and of course deputies and fire rescue were en route. As our deputy arrived on scene, they made contact with the caller, who was then identified as the infant's father, Joseph Napier, and the 2-month-old infant, who was unresponsive and turning blue, according to the deputy. The CPR was taken over by the deputy. The deputy ran the baby out of the house to EMS that was responding. They took over life-saving measures, transported the baby to the hospital, the baby ultimately was transported to Orlando, flown out for further evaluation, but ultimately the baby passed away. During our preliminary investigation, Mr. Napier told our deputies that the infant had choked and that he could see a small white object in the back of her mouth. He then gave a timeline of events and claimed that the child was left unattended on a couch with an 18-month-old, the other 18-month-old daughter, for approximately 10 minutes. Now, our forensic team has evaluated his phone. We conducted a search warrant. We know that he was in the other room neglecting these children for way longer than that. At least 30 minutes, if not more. He was playing on his phone. He wasn't in there with the children. We know through messages that were received between him and the biological mother of the child that he was complaining about the actions of the child. The child was colicky. The child was harming the other child. All these kinds of statements that we saw. And what a neglectful item to just leave these two children alone. But ultimately, through our investigation over the last 2 years, our forensic team has determined that his claims that the 18-month-old child placed a wipe down the throat of this 2-month-old infant, we've proven that that's not possible. And working with physicians, working with forensic examiners, measuring the child's hand, the throat, the distance, fingers, we know that Mr. Napier caused this death. I'm confident that our team has done a great job in putting this case together, and that when this ultimately makes it to trial, we will see a guilty verdict. So it may have taken us 2 years to get to this day where we're standing up here, but I'm proud of our team. I'm proud that they take their time and cross all their T's, dot all the I's, that they do it the right way to ensure that when we finally make an arrest, that we will see justice in these cases. And so I'm very, very proud of our team. See if there's anything else that I want to cover. He was arrested just this past Friday by detectives, charge of manslaughter. He's being held at the Indian River County Jail on a $750,000 bond. It's not a day to celebrate. There's a tragic loss of life here. This is a 2-month-old infant. The biological father of this child is going to go to prison. The mother has a drug problem. We've arrested her. She's going to be in prison. I've got the grandfather here, Joe Miller. He's here. Detective Sunkel is here with us as well. I'm sure you guys have questions about this case. I'm going to give both those guys a moment to talk before we take any questions. So, Mr. Miller, if you want to say something to the press, just step up
Yes,
here
sir.
for me. Yep.
You got to forgive me. I'm very emotional right now. It's been a real tough 2 years for our family. We have struggled. We've struggled really hard with this. But with Mr. Flowers and Mr. Sunkel, and they did dot their I's and they crossed their T's. Sometimes I thought this was never going to happen. But doing it the right way. And that's what they did. They did it the right way, and that's what took so long. They made a solid case. And that's all that matters. I can't wait for it it comes to a closing just for our family alone, because we're all upside down still in this, and I thank you.
Come over this way. Bob, you want to say something that I left out? I'm sure I left something out.
He actually covered everything that I was going to say, so if you guys have any questions, though, we can answer those.
So the father is charged with manslaughter in the baby girl's death. So how did the father kill the child?
By shoving the baby wipe down her throat.
And why would he do that?
She was a colic baby.
Yeah, that's going to end up being a question for him of exactly why he did it. But she was a colicky baby. She was having problems with staying quiet. She was crying a lot. So I think they were struggling with that.
And did someone Someone did call 911, is that correct? It was the
Yes,
father.
Joseph Napier called 911.
And what did he say on the 911 call?
I don't want to quote it because I don't want to get it wrong, but he called and said the baby was unresponsive and choking.
Can I step
Something
up
along
and
those
take
lines.
this real quick? Let me just say briefly regarding that 911 call. He waited 5 minutes to call 911. I don't know about you guys. My child's choking. I'm calling 911 right away. We know that. We've done forensic examination of this. We know his own statements that he waited 5 minutes to call 911. Unacceptable, completely unacceptable. So he knew what he was doing. He knew that he was the cause of this. He was getting his story together. Bob's sort of being a little shy about this, but the reality is he's done his work. He's worked this case. He put that wipe in that kid's mouth to shut him up. He had had enough. He had had enough of the crying. This is not a good guy. He had had enough. We've lost a 2-month-old infant. Our team has done a great job of proving that he had had enough that day. He put that wipe in that child's mouth. He pushed it down far enough that this child choked. It took doctors using forceps to go deep into this infant's throat. By the time that our deputy takes this child out to EMS, you can no longer see any of that wipe. That wipe is so far down the child's throat that you can't see the wipe anymore.
What was the girl's name?
Iris.
Iris.
Iris?
It's Noel.
Excuse me?
Noel, N-O-E-L.
Iris Noel.
That's, Noel is the middle name or the
Yes.
last name?
2 months old. Iris.
Napier is the last name.
How do you spell that, sir?
N-A-P-I-E-R?
This is Joseph Napier in this photo right here, arrested in our jail. Ma'am, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. So do you believe the intent was to kill or just to quiet the child and he unintentionally killed her?
Well, he's charged with manslaughter. If I could prove that he intentionally wanted to kill this child, we would definitely have that charge. We do believe that he placed that wipe in the child's mouth. He knew or should have known that that would cause harm to this child. He left the children alone together for 30 minutes, for over 30 minutes. His neglect of these children absolutely caused the death in this case. Yes, ma'am.
And as for the other child, the 18-month-old, is he or she now in the custody of family members?
That's correct, in the custody of family.
Was he home alone with the 2 kids, or was the mother?
He was. Mom had left for work, and he was texting back and forth with mom. He was giving her updates on his complaints about the child. All of that goes into this case. All of that shows that he had the intent. He had, he was trying to get away. He goes in the other room, leaving these 2 children, 18 months and 2 months, leaves them alone for over 30 minutes while he's on Facebook, while he's playing on his phone, while he's doing all these other things. In the meantime, this child ends up choking to death on this wife. Completely unacceptable.
Were they on the floor, or were they sitting on a sofa? Or what were they,
The child was actually on a futon.
which one?
The 2-month-old was on a futon. The 18-month-old was on the floor watching television in the room. You want to say? Sure, please go right ahead.
I was the last one in the house. I was getting ready to take my other granddaughter to Fort Pierce for dinner. As I was getting dressed, Joe was screaming the top of his lungs at the baby, "Why can't you shut the F up? Why can't you shut up?" I put my shorts on, I go outside, and I'm like, "Hey, that's an angel sound, bud. My son had colic. I understand about a colic baby. You got to hold them and cradle them and love them." And that was the last thing I heard.
So, you've mentioned this, sir, but what is your reaction that he would do such a horrendous thing, putting a baby wipe in a little baby's mouth?
Who could ever imagine that? Well, I mean, you can't. You can't fathom to kill your own child. My own grandbaby, I still can't fathom it. But I know something happened. And I know my other little princess, Vidal, did not do that. It was too far down. I'm thinking, just as a grandfather, let's say Vidal put a baby wipe to keep her quiet, it would still be out of her mouth. It's not going to be pushed. She's a baby too. She's just my little baby. That's another little angel sitting there. But there was a lot of anger when I was getting ready to go to Fort Pierce to take my other grandbaby to dinner.
You had just left the house minutes
I just
earlier.
left the house. We get a frantic phone call about 45 minutes later from my daughter. My daughter tells me, get to the hospital. I think Iris is dead. So, of course, that's what we do. We went straight to the hospital.
What hospital was the baby taken to?
Indian River. It wasn't there long. It was transported by a helicopter to Orlando. That's where it was pronounced dead.
I just want to reemphasize too the dedication and passion of our team. And I got to tell you, we've all got little kids, every one of us. The folks that work these cases, our detectives that go and handle autopsies, our entire team, all of us, we have kids, and this stuff affects us. It's why we have our STAR team. It's why we have all the things in place that we do to take care of our folks. But I got to really commend Detective Sunkel, and I called him Friday to talk about this case and the fact that he had got the arrest warrant and made the arrest on this case. And, you know, his week, he's in patrol now. He's been promoted. He's done a great job for our agency. And his week started with a death of a 1-month-old that was a co-sleeping case, right? That was a patrol item that we responded to. On Wednesday, we were together. He was doing the honor guard for the death of one of our dispatchers, one of our own. To bring closure in this case is just a fantastic way for us to wrap up a really tough week last week, and for us to be standing here today with Mr. Miller is just an honor and a blessing that we can bring some justice in this case. So I'm happy that we're able to do this. It's not a happy day because we still have dead children that we don't want that, but it gives us a little bit of hope that we can do the right thing, and our team did the right thing 100% all the way.
Could the detective explain, kind of walk us through how you determined that this guy was the killer? I mean, it took 2 years, so people at home may be wondering, well, gee, why would it take 2 years to solve this? Can you explain that?
As far as the time frame, these kinds of investigations just take a lot of time. We're working with doctors, state attorneys, other agencies. So while we're working on this, there's a lot that goes into it, so it just takes time. And we want to make sure that we're doing it right and that we're not missing anything, as we want to be 100% of the facts before we make the decision to make an arrest in this case. So it does take a long time. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that point us in this direction. A lot of it comes from doctors explaining what an 18-month-old is capable, what a 2-month-old is capable. Obviously, we know that a 2-month-old, they have what's called a tongue thrust response, so they're not going to be physically capable of swallowing a baby wipe. So we know that the 2-month-old couldn't have done this to herself. As far as the 18-month-old, we went as far as doing measurements on her hands. We had the medical examiner do measurements on Iris's mouth, the distance from the mouth to the top of her throat, where Mr. Napier said the baby wipe had started when he first saw it. And it's not physically possible for Vidal's hands to push it that far. And also the tenacity that would be needed for a kid that age to be pushing it down, it's just not possible. So a bunch of things like that combined.
What caused you to be skeptical when he said, hey, you know, the 18-month-old did this to the 2-month-old? Why did you feel this is not adding up?
It wasn't really being skeptical. It was just making sure we're being thorough from the beginning. We go to every death and we treat everything as a homicide until we can prove it's not a homicide.
What was his reaction on Friday when you got arrested?
He was less than pleased. He was pretty angry, was upset that it took 2 years for us to figure out what was going on.
Did he give you a confession?
No, he did not.
Did he say, I didn't do this, you got
He
this all
said
wrong?
he's sticking with his same statement from the first night that he did not do this, we have it wrong, and that it must have been the 18-month-old.
Does he have a prior criminal record?
He had a few arrests. I'm not sure what they all were for, but they were, the last one I believe was in 2013, so it wasn't that recent.
And what does he do for a living, or what did he do for a living? Does he
I'm not sure what he's currently doing for a living.
Here's a welder.
a welder?